Hey there, this is Walter, part of the Beyond the Mask production team, and before today's episode, just want to drop you a quick note that a technical recording glitch led to today's episode being recorded on a less capable microphone. So you'll notice the overall sound quality is a little less than what you're used to hearing. We apologize for that inconvenience, and thank you for bearing with us. It's still going to be a great episode, and we've done our best to clean things up to make it as clear as possible. So thanks again for your understanding. Now, let's get to the episode. Today's episode of Beyond the Mask is presented by the insurance specialists at Bright Think Wealth Strategies. Find the disability insurance coverage that fits you best right now. Email Robert Smith at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. The show is also made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. Get a free consultation today to be guided through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Just visit crnafinancialplanning.com. We'd also like to thank Helping Hands and OSA EMR for their support of the show. And don't forget, listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits. For more information on how you can submit them, check out the CE Credit tab on our website, beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, Innovation and Opportunities for CRNAs, with Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. We know you spend your day caring for your patient's best interests. On our show, we want to care for you. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA industry. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7.
Sharon, good morning.
Well, good morning to you. Look at you all snazzy in your purple. You know I love that shirt.
That purple, I know. Well, you got on to me yesterday for not wearing the pink tie when you had your pink suit on. So, you know.
We usually dress alike.
That's kind of scary, isn't it?
I know, right? But your wife dressed you yesterday.
She did. She picked out the time suit. So. Well, another great episode here coming from the Windy City.
It is.
Annual Congress together again. This is great to see everyone and be able to actually be in person. It's amazing.
I absolutely agree. And this is a very important topic.
Yes.
And especially given what the world in healthcare.
Yeah, well, let's introduce our guest today, Matt Zinder. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. We were just commenting on your wonderful voice, so I think this is going to go really well. Matt, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your podcast? You have your own podcast as well. So
I do have my own podcast. Well, thank you very much again for having me. I come from Maryland. I have my own anesthesia practice there in Maryland. It's an ambulatory surgery center-based practice that was actually started by my father 38 years ago.
No kidding.
Yes. So
that's an interesting tidbit.
Well, it gets a little more interesting. In that, because he started it so far, in the past, when legislation came out in the early 80s that CRNAs could bill for their own services.
Right.
It's from Medicare. My father left his chief CRNA position at a Baltimore hospital and started Zinder Anesthesia Associates. My father is the first CRNA in the country to bill for his own services.
Oh, wow.
His Medicare ID number is NA01.
What? Really?
Wow. We'll have to tell Sandy. We did a podcast on that because she was on the AANA board whenever all of the, and she tells the backstory on how we got third-party reimbursement.
Oh, great. Yes. He always kept a low profile, so no one knows him from the old school AANA. I actually have spoken to a few people at this meeting about him, but I mentioned it yesterday during my talk. But yeah, but again, we've been around 38 years. I own it still to this day. We still do the same thing, single specialty surgeon-owned facilities. We haven't touched a hospital in 38 years. So, that's, it's a nice life.
Yeah.
But then I've also switched gears a little bit personally where I've started to do a few things that my father never did because he was always very clinical and business oriented. I've started probably about 13 years ago to start getting into education. So lecture circuit and working with universities. And it started with business of anesthesia, which back then, about 13 years ago, there was no such thing as a business of anesthesia talk.
Right.
So it started with University of Maryland, and then it expanded to some other universities. My alma mater was VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University Medical College of Virginia. So I did a few there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to get into the professional conferences, and then started to get into the concept or the idea of provider wellness. And then that, of course, led to the talks that I do as far as that's concerned. So that started probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And as you might imagine, doing these different conferences, there was a lot of resistance to hearing those types of talks. But then, interestingly enough, COVID hits. And I guess if I could say that if we could pull any silver lining whatsoever from this experience we've gone through, it has brought that idea to the forefront of needing to change that culture where we are taught in training to only take care of others and not ourselves.
Right.
So there has been a higher demand for that subject, and hopefully that means people are taking a little bit more notice to it. But that's basically me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Unless you want to get into hobbies.
If we have time, we'll get there. So we are going to be talking about provider wellness today, and really what that means. You're right; it took on a different connotation during COVID and after COVID. I mean, we've seen so many nurses and CRNAs who've gone through burnout, and this is a very important topic. And I think it's also made people realize that there is a place for provider taking care of themselves. Like you said before, you would have never been able to talk about that subject. Yeah. So what made you interested in this topic per se? I mean, here you are, you're running your own business, and was it something in you that said, hey, maybe I'm not doing it? Or was it just looking out and saying the broader community needs this?
Well, quite honestly, it started probably from two sources, and one of which was I've always been the kind of person that has always been interested in trying new things, different things. That's why I kind of made the joke about hobbies. I have many. And one day, many, many years ago, it was probably about 13 or 14 years ago, looking through the bulletin at different, where do I go for points, for credits? And there was a week-long certification in hypnosis
Oh,
course.
yeah. What's
Ron
his name?
Esslinger.
Yep.
Former CRNA, and an amazing experience, became certified hypnotherapist. So
my Linda Williams,
yes,
my mentor.
That's how I met Linda Williams. I met her at the International Hypnosis Convention, and I was introduced to her by Ron.
Wow.
Yes, they're good friends.
Yes. So that one, just one arm of that, and then on the other side, it came from self-preservation. So not only are we in a pretty stressful profession, I'm also running a practice, which is sometimes more stressful.
Right.
And I started to get sick. I started to feel it physically. And knowing some of the background I already had, and then I had already been in education at this point, and doing the lecture circuit, things like that, started to do a lot of research on the subject and applying some of the things that I was already teaching to myself, and I felt instant results. And then I really jumped with both feet into the subject and started teaching it and creating talks and things like that. So, I mean, at the risk of sounding selfish, it started really with self-preservation.
Yeah.
What is it? You got to put the mask on yourself before you put it on to others.
That's exactly right. And that's where I'm really going with it these days is if you take care of yourself first, you will be a more effective provider for others. And we're not taught that.
And I think that's true in so many walks of life. I mean, we see this all the time with folks who do burn out in every avenue of life. And the reason I asked the question the way I did is what I find on the show is most of the people who are coming up with ideas or doing things like this have absolutely gone through it themselves, which made them interested in it. And now they want to teach others about how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's your story as well. So you said you started doing some things. What strategies did you start to do? You mentioned hypnosis. Do you use that in wellness?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I can tell you that from a personal standpoint, there was one day that I remember like it was yesterday that probably changed my whole ideology on it, on the actual techniques and things. Was I had a terrible day at work. It was combined with a terrible day with the practice administratively. I was feeling fairly miserable that day. Came home, pulled into my driveway, and didn't get out of my car. I pulled up an app that I just happened to have. It was called Aura. And this app gives one free 3-minute guided meditation a day if you don't pay for it. And I hadn't paid for it because I hadn't done anything like that. So I was just like, you know what? So I just did the 3-minute meditation, and I felt instant results. And then I started to do it daily. And as I started to get a little bit of time under my belt of doing a daily guided meditation, I noticed that, like as an example, there was one particular practice that for being politically correct, the surgeon owner was not such a nice guy.
Gotcha.
Gave us a lot of trouble administratively and in the OR. And something typical happened that would have sent me into a full-on sympathetic response.
Yeah.
But I had a few of these guided meditations under my belt. I had been doing it for a little while, and one of those events happened, and I felt no physical response.
Wow.
And it to the point where it struck me like, whoa, this is interesting. And then again, I was sold.
It's interesting that you've had that. I've been wanting to do transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
And started doing a little bit of it, but it's like I haven't found my rhythm with it. I mean, everybody talks about meditation, how great it is for you. But it's interesting that you did this one and then you're like hooked. To me, it's almost like a time thing. I just don't take the time to do it. And it's like anything else. We all know that working out and eating right and doing the things, but you've got to work that time into your schedule to be able to do it. And that's another point of this is, how do you make the time in today's environment with all the stressors and everything going on to take care of yourself? I mean, how did you, busy guy who's got lots of hobbies, and you've got this business you're running, you're giving anesthesia, I'm sure, and now you're doing a podcast, you're doing all these things. How do you take the time? It's not make the time, it's take it. How did you decide I'm going to do this?
So I'll speak first directly to what you just said about transcendental meditation, and I totally agree with you. I am also trained in transcendental meditation.
Okay.
They want you doing 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night.
Right, and that's hard.
I don't have time for
Oh
that.
my God.
I don't have time for that. I would encourage you to research mindfulness meditation.
Okay.
Mindfulness meditation, 1 minute. If
Really?
you actively meditate 1 minute, you've meditated that day.
Really?
Now, I generally recommend between 5 and 15 minutes a day, but 1 minute. There's no excuse for not giving yourself 1 minute.
Is that what's on the Apple Watch that I just dismiss it whenever it pops up on my watch about this meditation?
Well, it might be one of those deals where they say, be present for this moment. And that's powerful too.
It pops up with a little flower on my watch, and I just hit dismiss every single time.
Well, give yourself a moment next time and see how.
I think I will. I'm going to go, Matthew, and I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Well, and I just find it really hard. I mean, like all of us type age, you're always sitting in a moment, but you're thinking about all the 30 other things you've got to do ahead of you and what just happened behind you. And so many times I catch myself, even with my kids, I have to manually say, they don't understand that you're thinking about 20 other things. You need to focus on that kid right now because they're going to pick up on that.
Yeah.
And there's times I'm talking to people and I'm looking at you, but I'm thinking about 20 other things.
Yeah.
And I have to manually take my brain and say, stop it and listen to this person. What they're saying is important.
And that's something that mindfulness trains you to do.
Let me ask you, Jeremy, because, you've got a child from a previous marriage who's grown.
Right.
And now you've got children that are very young. Do you find that you are a better parent now with Landon and Holland than you were with Lauren?
Well,
I know you're a good dad.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, and Lauren and I have some conversations around this, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but we do have some conversations around it, because there's a part of me that has guilt, one, because we went through divorce, and two, that I was working so hard to build my business. I didn't really focus on her, even though it was just us most of the time. I could focus, but I had so much going on in building the business that it wasn't quality time. So we talk about this, and I tell her, I'm like, Holland and Landon are never going to have the experience together that me and you have. We have a bond together because of what we went through together. Mm-hmm. And I think there's parts of her that feels a little, I'm not going to say jealous, but a lesser term than that of our kids, Holland and Landon, because they have a different experience with me.
Mm-hmm.
They have a different experience in that, Sarah and I are going to stay together, and hopefully, and I think that part of it, yes, I think that there's a difference there. But back to your question, I feel like yes, I am, because one, I'm at a different point in my life, and we're not trying to grow our business. We always are, but it's a different feel now with the kids, and I know how quickly Lauren has grown up,
Mm.
and it makes me think, I can make these extra 4 or 5 calls and do this thing at 4 o'clock on a Thursday, but my kids have a game tonight, and I need to get my butt out of here because they're only going to be little for another, Holland's 9. I mean, 5 or 6 years, and they're not going to hang out with Dad anymore.
That's going to happen for 5 years for that little girl.
Oh yeah, she's a little sassy pants. So, but and yes, to your point, yes, absolutely. So, sorry, I'm gonna digress because we get off on these tangents. So, but these are all things that you're talking about as well.
Yeah.
Have you thought about what would happen if you weren't able to work for 2 or 3 years? On average, 25% of people will file a disability claim, and most of us aren't prepared for that loss of income. Every CRNA needs to protect their biggest asset, yourself, and your ability to earn with a disability insurance policy. We recommend contacting Robert Smith, a master disability insurance specialist with more than 30 years of experience and 1,800 CRNA clients, to find the coverage that fits you best. The best way to do that is to send him an email at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com, or call him at 504-394-6557.
Talk about the Provider Wellness Symposium and AANA's involvement with that, and your involvement with that.
So I'm the co-founder of the event, I'm sure you've heard the name Rodrigo Garcia.
Yes.
So he's a very good friend of mine. And it was interesting during like the shutdown and the height of COVID, before the vaccines, when everybody's kind of freaking out a little bit, AANA reached out to me to say, hey, can you do a webinar on, some strategies and wellness and things like that? And they said, we want you to do it with this gentleman that we also work with. And I was like, sure, that's great. And here's his phone number. We'll just, you guys coordinate it, and we'll put it on this particular date. So I call Rigo, and the first time we were on the phone together was a 3-hour conversation.
Oh, wow.
We're instant friends, and we've been very close ever since. A little bit further down the road, I mentioned to him an idea that I've had for years, and that was to put on as large of an event as possible, a national meeting size like this. And the entire theme of the whole event is provider wellness, provider self-care, changing that culture of taking care of ourselves first so we can take care of others. So putting on a wellness conference for healthcare providers. And he said, I'm in. And we've been planning it for the last 2 years. And then with the people that we knew at AANA, they were also very interested. So they actually partnered with us to get the event up and running. Now, it does span medical specialties, but AANA specifically really supported us and, like I said, became a partner. So we've been talking about it throughout this whole meeting. I mentioned it during my talk yesterday, and the same for Rigo. He mentioned it as well, and we've been getting just great support from AANA on it. So this year will be the first year. It's the first weekend of November in Austin, and it's at the Lost Pines Resort in Austin, Texas. So we have high hopes for it, and everybody we talk to about it just says, well, that's just a great idea. But
so do you have a website, or how do people know about it?
Providersymposium.com. And one thing I can tell you about it is, and it's a unique event. So it is an event that's similar to this, where it is filled, we're working on creating an exhibit, but geared for wellness, so almost like a wellness expo. We have a main room and 3 breakout rooms of experts talking, doing lectures on wellness. But this is where it gets really interesting. Go in the morning, hear the lectures, go away for lunch, come back, total switch of gears. The rooms are now experiences. So in the morning, you heard a lecture on meditation. Now you're going to go to a room and meditate. You're going to be in a led meditation. So one room meditation, one room breath work, one room hypnosis, one room yoga. We even have a Wim Hof method instructor coming. He's going to do ice plunges.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the list is endless. I mean, we have a music therapy teacher coming to teach a Native American flute. I mean, just amazing program. We made it on a weekend, so it would be easy for people to make it, not having to take off work or vacation time. We also, for a fraction of what one would usually pay, got 16 and a half credits for nurses, advanced practice nurses, CRNAs, NPs. And then we also got AANA credits as well for physicians. So
wow, somebody did a lot of work for that, just that piece of it.
It's been a lot of
It's been a
work.
heavy lift. Yeah.
So I'm talking to the one who did the work. I can feel your pain there.
We've had some great support. I mean, just some great support. People have been very interested in it. So, but I would say that the one issue is we as healthcare providers are procrastinators when it comes to hitting a register button.
Yeah.
So
always. It'll be the very last moment.
And I'm
They're all
guilty.
they're all like that.
I'm guilty of it too. I mean, when I went to Meteor, I signed up the night before.
Well, used to our name badges would tell you in the corner when you signed up.
Oh.
You were assigned a number.
Oh.
And I was always one of the first ones, but it was because I derived joy from seeing that now.
Yeah.
They don't do it on here. I think it would make it competitive again. If I could come up and I'd go, oh, you're 1,499. Dude. I mean, we could have a lot of fun with that. We used to.
That's right. Yeah, it definitely would be more of a comfort if more people would register.
Sure.
But yeah, we have high hopes for it. We really do.
So you mentioned some of the things you're going to do at the conference. What strategies, outside of meditation, as we've talked about, do you recommend to kind of change the culture?
Well, changing the culture is a big nut to crack because
it takes 10 years.
And it's something I've kind of made a personal mission, but it is. I'm actually trying, and trying is a big word here. I'm trying to write a book on the subject. Because it is a culture. I mean, and from as far back as we can remember in healthcare, that we are not allowed to apply this information to ourselves. And so what I try to do is discuss doing it from the top down. I think every large institution needs a chief wellness officer, starting with that. So starting with the top down with institutional support, making it okay. But then we also need to start from the bottom up, meaning each individual provider should be engaged in healthy activities. If you take care of yourself first, you are a more effective provider. So meditation is one of the main things I do push.
Okay.
The app that I actually do recommend, I have no affiliation, no monetary anything with them other than use, is called Insight Timer. Now, the good thing about Insight Timer, one of the good things is that it's free. So that's obviously a good thing.
Yeah.
And second, it quite literally has over 140,000 free guided meditations on it. So you can literally put anything you want to work on into a search bar, and something relevant is going to come up for you to work on.
Say the name of it one more time.
Insight Timer.
Insight. INSIGH.
And of course, the other ones, Headspace, Calm. I mean, there's some very popular ones, But those are two very good ones because the production value is very high on them as far as the guided meditations. But so meditation, I think, is huge. But then, the simple things that we know, we have to eat right. We have to have good nutrition. We are animals that need movement.
Right.
And I always talk, during my stress management lecture about exercise. It's only one slide because it's cliche.
Right.
But I have to say, it's like and I'm not saying, and I always tell people, I'm not telling you to go get on a treadmill for 3 hours if you never do that. I'm not telling you to get on for 5 minutes if you never do that. Go for a walk. There's research that shows not only does that walk assist you, but getting outside and breathing fresh air will assist mental health.
Right.
And forward motion. That's the whole basis of EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's about forward. They call it forward flow. When you see the world passing by your eyes, and your brain is recognizing the world moving past you. In other words, you're in a forward motion. It actually is a powerful suppressor of your amygdala, which activates the sympathetic nervous system. So all of these things, very small acts that we know to do, would make huge difference. Make a huge difference.
But you hit the nail on the head. And this is something that I struggle with personally, and Sharon, I think you do too, to a little extent. We know what we should do, but what I've always found is when I get away from the guy that I work out with as a trainer, and I've worked out with him for a while. COVID threw us off, and then but starting back and getting back there is really tough. We know what we should do, but all of us kind of need some impetus, some person, something to say. And yours, it sounded like, or when you were sitting in your car having a rough day, that was your impetus. We all have an impetus. What do you recommend for that? Do you recommend people talk to folks like yourself? Do you recommend, coaching? And, how do you get started? You're sitting in this and you look and you go, man, I'm listening to this podcast and this is all me. I'm stressed out. I have no time. Nothing seems to be going my way. How do they get help?
So there are many angles that we could go on this. First of all, start small. Always start small. If you go in to doing anything big, it's not going to last.
Right.
So there's a great story that I actually tell during one of my lectures where there was a gentleman who was literally 400 pounds, obviously needed to make a change in his life, and decided, I'm going to join a gym. But he goes to this gym, or he makes a decision, I'm going to go to this gym 7 days a week. So already you're thinking, all right, this is going to be a failure, right? But what did he do? He went 7 days a week and went for 5 minutes. Every day he went, he changed, he got on the treadmill, 5 minutes, got off, changed, and left for 7 days a week. So what was he doing there? He was showing up. We are very habit-driven organisms. If we create a habit first, then that habit will expand, especially if it's healthy. We are also pleasure-driven organisms. If we start to feel better just from those small movements, we're going to expand that to feel better and better and better. So start small. And then here's the controversial part. I'm going to use a dirty word. I believe that eventually we should learn from the aviation community and we should mandate health in healthcare providers. You are not going to get onto an airplane where the pilot in that cockpit was not mandated to take care of themselves. It is called a first class medical, and it is hard to pass. And if you don't pass the first class medical, you are not a pilot. That is a mandate. It is a mandate of good health. Why? Because life is at stake.
People's life in your hands.
What other profession is life at stake? So so eventually down the road, it should be an expectation that we take care of ourselves. I know, big nut to crack, but I think it's important because just think about it. You go into work with the flu. We've all done it. How effective of a provider are you? You have to feel good to be an effective provider. So that means we need to take care of ourselves.
Beyond the Mask is made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. With almost 2 decades of experience, the firm guides CRNAs through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Schedule a free consultation today by calling 855-304-3748 or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
Okay, so what about student wellness? I'm sure they're under a lot of stresses.
Yes. So especially now. So I'm involved with a few things. I'm adjunct professor at 3 different universities. But one program in particular that I'm involved with is with Dr. Peter Strube. He works with students who are trying to pass the C exam and the board exam, or just trying to make it through their program. And he had the wherewithal, and we've been friends for many years from the lecture circuit, and he had the wherewithal to say, well, they need some assistance tutoring for the didactic, the clinical, clinical or whatever, the academic. But these people also need to work on their wellness, their stress management, things like that, and brought me in, and I work directly with them one-on-one to teach them techniques to maintain stress management.
Hmm.
We've been doing it a few years now. We're almost up to 400 students, and we've had great success. And I mean, people that have failed the boards 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times.
Wow.
It's because they're getting in the way of themselves. So student wellness is huge right now, because the other problem is the current state of affairs, which is there are students starting the CRNA program, which we all know is incredibly intense. They're coming in from COVID ICUs. They're already stressed out. They're already burnt out.
Yeah,
some of them already have PTSD.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
It's a serious problem that the programs are noticing now in the present moment. So it has to be addressed. It has to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, whether it's wellness programs or whatever it is. We have to change the mentality of teaching the opposite. We have to create supportive systems for these people to be able to just get through the program.
Right.
Because it's the only answer right now to the shortage, I can tell you.
Now, is that why you spoke on PTSD at the AANA conference?
Well, not so much from student wellness, because actually I've been doing that talk for probably about 5 or 6 years, some iteration of it.
Okay.
We always are updating our talks. But honestly, I started that PTSD talk because my father actually, unfortunately, the bookend of his great career was a critical incident in the operating room, and he got PTSD from that. And that was my introduction to, wow, there is a possibility that we as healthcare providers could get PTSD. I thought that was only for frontline soldiers, or EMS or police. Now that really opened my eyes. And he's also an example I use in my talk of someone who did not seek assistance. And I did an interview, and for those who saw the talk, he was just, he exuded pain over talking about it. And the interview was 7 years after the event. And he finally got help, the proper help, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. He finally got that 13 years after the event, and his nightmares went away almost immediately. It's definitive. But people just, there's a stigma attached to psychological assistance, unfortunately. So, and that's another thing I'm kind of working on, taking on these big projects. But yeah, so that's where that talk came from.
Okay.
Because the mention of the student issue, and I think it is an issue, is absolute present day.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of people write, I wasn't thinking of that. I learned that through an email string at a university that I'm involved with. I'm thinking, wow, these are COVID ICU nurses starting.
I never thought about it.
Just an incredible, hard program. So we have to look at that. We really have to give them support.
Well, we interviewed Erin Martin, who is director at the Mayo, and she brought up something that I had never really thought about. They think that these kids who were in the programs during COVID will be some of the CRNAs don't like change.
Right.
That these kids had to deal with change every single day, and so that is going to equip them better than, say, my generation was equipped to adapt to all the change, because it changed every day for them whenever they were students.
They went through a very difficult and very different program.
So there's a silver lining to some of it.
We have to pull some of those out of this. We have to.
Yeah, you're right.
For our own mental health.
You're right.
That's true. Well, as we kind of wrap up, so tell us real quickly about your other hobbies. So you got my interest up. So I'm hearing all these things you're doing. I'm trying to figure out. He's got the same 24 hours I do.
Yeah, how does he do that?
Must be the meditation.
The 1 minute, man. We're going to meditate.
I know, right?
Once we finish here.
Well, I have to admit, unfortunately, because of all these things, the hobbies are the first to go off for it, because I've always been a person that just loves to do other things, But beekeeping, flying, anything. I used to do a lot of like triathlons. I used to love the exercise aspect of, hobby aspect of exercise.
So that's a commitment.
Yeah, I haven't done one of those in a while. But yeah, I just love to try different things. Anything that I do a bit of art, like 3-dimensional, like wire art and sculpture, because my background actually is arts. I was not training to go into medicine immediately in college. I'm actually, I've got 2 years of photojournalism training under my belt before switching to medicine. I just didn't want to live the feast or famine lifestyle. It took me 2 years to figure that out, and a couple years for my father.
At least you did, in only 2 years.
Right. So I have a lot of the art background, so I kind of do that as a hobby, things like that. So yeah, just all kinds of, I try to make it very diverse. I like to try different things. So, keeps the blood pumping.
Absolutely. Well, I always tell my retiree clients when they're getting ready to retire, you've been this kind of cream of the crop in the nursing industry, and you've kind of risen to a certain standard, and you hold people's lives in your hand every single day. And the ones that I see really struggle are the ones that their identity was wrapped up in that.
Mm-hmm.
And they have friends, but most of their friends have to do with the CRNA community. And
why do you keep looking at me?
No reason. But then they don't have a lot of outside things outside of that. What's next? What am I going to do? Because I lost my identity.
You're describing my father right now.
Well, they struggle for, several years. I mean, usually I tell folks, you've got to, if you're like that, it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to figure out who you are again.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're not working, so no money's coming in. So now you're having to spend the money that you've saved all these years. So it's a double whammy. I mean, I was telling my father-in-law the other day, quasi slowing down retirement, I said, you need to have a plan on what's next. Now, and I think he'll be fine. My mother-in-law, she's a workaholic. I don't know how that's going to work. I said, I'm not worried about you. I'm more worried about her. But
he has to be half psychologist.
I mean, you really do when you're dealing with people's money and lives like that. But yeah, it's very interesting. All right. Anything you want to conclude on to the audience as we kind of wrap here?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, really, please hit that register button for the Provider Wellness Symposium. Again, providersymposium.com. It's an important event, and I hope to see people there and fill up the room. And then again, if anybody has any questions for me or any follow-up or need any assistance, I'm there for students. I'm there for providers. They can email me at zinderllc@gmail.com, and that includes the student one-on-one program if anybody has any interest in that. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as
Great.
well. So
Goodness, between listening to y'all's voices like this, my heart rate has slowed down. I could probably, I don't mean this bad, but I mean, I could almost take a nap. Just the voices.
Yeah, you have to preface that. Boy, this was such an interesting conversation.
It was, but I mean, there's something to the voice thing.
Yeah,
I don't.
there is.
Clearly, I don't have
Well,
it.
we didn't even hit on the hypnosis part. I mean, maybe we can have another conversation
I took a
about that.
hypnosis class, but I think that I slept through it. I do, because they would do all this stuff, and I don't remember.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing about hypnosis is the stigma that's attached to it. That's the first thing I usually go over when I talk about it, because it's incredibly effective. And you're only creating your own outcomes. Nobody's making you do anything. You're creating your own outcomes. I can give you, so many examples. It's too bad we don't have another 3 hours to talk about this
right.
Stuff, but yeah, it's incredibly effective. I highly recommend it.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have him back.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Be happy to. Appreciate it.
Matt, thank you. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for all you're doing for the CRNA community and the medical community in general. I mean, this is stuff that needs to be talked about, needs to be brought to the forefront, and you're doing exactly that. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Sharon, I think it's a wrap.
I think so.
We want to thank our listeners for listening to Beyond the Mask with Jeremy Stanley and
Sharon Pierce.
they like our show, Sharon. They want to help us grow. How can they do that?
Well, the best way to help us grow is to leave us a review, but make it.
Oh, you almost said it. That's right. We all know there's enough negativity in this world, for sure. So
we're in the top 50 medical podcasts in the country, on our way to number
1, we hope, and we're already number 1 in the CRNA community. And we're very thankful for our listeners for that.
Absolutely.
Till next time.
It's a wrap.
As a CRNA, you spend years preparing yourself for this career, so we don't want to see you lose out on any of the income you've worked so hard to earn. The best way to protect yourself and give you the confidence that a major life event won't disrupt your financial future is through disability insurance. We've known disability income specialist Robert Smith for many years and have seen the work he's done with nearly 2,000 CRNAs over multiple decades. He can help identify any gaps in your existing coverage and fill those gaps by finding the best value on a policy. Contact Robert and let him know you heard about him on our podcast. Send him an email at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com. Or call him at 504-394-6557. Protect your greatest asset as a CRNA, yourself and your ability to earn a living by adding disability insurance to your financial plan. Today's show is brought to you by the folks at CRNA Financial Planning, an independent consulting firm that offers financial planning services exclusively to CRNAs and their families. From planning for a child's future college expenses to building a predictable income stream in retirement, the firm is committed to offering you comprehensive financial services, customized to fit your unique needs and objectives. If you have questions about your financial future, get them answered. Call the team at 855-304-3748. That's 855-304-3748. Or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists and President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global anesthesia support community that takes donations to allow nurse anesthetists in low and middle income countries to go to educational programs, buy equipment, or textbooks. Your donations are tax deductible, and we would appreciate your support.
OSA EMR is a free anesthesia EMR developed by CRNAs that you can download and use on an iPad. Our nonprofit mission is to make sure that solo and small practice CRNAs can digitally record their anesthetics. To learn more, visit osaemr.com to download and consider donating to our cause. Remember, for CRNAs, data is destiny.
Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you like to listen to shows. Also be sure to check out BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. Each episode is posted there with a corresponding blog post, and we timestamp important parts of the episode to help you quickly get to the content you're looking for. Also check out the special series section on the site. You can follow along and catch up on the CRNA History Series, episodes specifically about political conversations in the industry. Or try the CRNA Personal Finance Series. It's all on BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And if you have a question for the show or want to be a guest, or even suggest a particular topic, fill out the contact form on the site or send an email directly to us at info@BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And lastly, let's take the conversation social. Check out our Beyond the Mask podcast Facebook page and Facebook group.